هودي مسيحيين تنك.
بدنا القانون، بدنا القانون، بدنا القانون.
بالاخر التنك بتكبيه.
الكويت عم تتعرض لحرب كتير كبيرة بأساسها الحرب بالشام بالضاحية الجنوبية عون وجماعته.
Good afternoon and thank you for joining us on FutureTV. I'm Linda Tamim and these are today's top stories. Independent March MP for lawmakers warn the meetings of the Electoral Subcommittee will lead to vacuum as opposing parties are sharply divided over the new electoral law. U.S. Army General Martin Dempsey says a Russian shipment of anti-ship missiles to Syria could embolden President Bashar al-Assad's forces and prolong the conflict. And Turkish Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan says his country has significantly reduced its oil imports from Iran. Independent March 14 lawmakers warn the meetings of the Electoral Subcommittee will lead to vacuum as foes are sharply divided over the new electoral law, pointing out that they may run their candidacies based on the 1960 law if the rivals fail to agree on a new vote law. The MPs hailed the efforts exerted by the rival parties to facilitate holding a parliamentary session to agree on an electoral law, expressing concern over the discussions between the Electoral Subcommittee members on the extension of the Parliament's term. The MPs rejected to link setting a date for a parliamentary session based on a unanimous decision taken by the members of the Electoral Subcommittee. The meeting that was held at the residence of MP Boutros Harib revealed that if rival parties fail to reach common ground over a new electoral law, then the March 14 independent MPs will submit their candidacies based on the 1960 electoral law. Lebanese President Michel Sleiman says it is crucial to form a new government. Addressing visitors at Baghdad Palace, Sleiman also stressed the need for drafting an electoral law as quickly as possible in order to hold the elections on time. He reiterated his stance of non-intervention in domestic Syrian affairs based on the Baghdad Declaration. Among Sleiman's visitors was head of the Syndicate Coordination Committee, Hanna Gharib, who urged him to submit the salary scale to Parliament for approval. The forces of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad have thwarted an attempt by terrorists to infiltrate into Syrian territories. This is according to the state-run Sana news agency, which says the terrorist group was sneaking into the town of Tal al-Kalakh near the border with Lebanon. The source added that two of the group's members were killed in the ambush, and the army confiscated the weapons in their possession while the rest of the terrorist group's members were able to flee. Meanwhile, the Free Syrian Army has announced the death of 10 Hezbollah members who were trying to infiltrate into the fields of Al-Qusayr. On Tuesday, Syria's opposition National Coalition demanded Lebanon to control the border and secure the withdrawal of Hezbollah fighters from the neighboring country, warning that 30,000 civilians in the rebel-held town of Al-Qusayr faced an extremely dangerous situation. Turkey has softened its opposition toward a Russia-US brokered international conference on Syria following Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan's trip to the United States. Local media says Ankara agreed to an international gathering in Geneva to solve the Syrian conflict in return for some guarantees from Washington, including an assurance that the process will not be open-ended and the parties will not allow months-long delaying tactics in the name of diplomacy. Ankara has so far opposed such an international gathering, arguing that it would buy Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's time. Erdogan, who spoke to Turkish reporters in Washington, said he will visit Russia for further talks on a solution to the Syrian crisis. For its part, France says it will oppose the peace conference if Iran was invited, clouding the prospect for a U.S.-Russian initiative to end the two-year-old war. The United Nations Refugee Agency has released figures stating that more than 1.5 million people have fled Syria as conditions in the country has deteriorated rapidly. The exodus has accelerated over the past 4 months, and the agency estimates that nearly 1 million refugees have registered since January. The UNHCR says it has counted 470,457 and 473,587 refugees in Lebanon and Jordan, respectively, this week.
The number of Syrian refugees who have now left their country has surpassed 1.5 million. The Syrian conflict continues to have a devastating impact on the lives of those who are forced to flee. The fact that more than 1.5 million people have registered or have appointments with UNHCR sadly means the actual number is much higher. UNHCR has registered close to 1 million refugees since the 1st of January this year. This is about 250,000 people each month. UNHCR has been present in Tartus since early April and is permanently present in 5 cities. The others are Damascus, Aleppo, Hasaka and Homs. Overall in Syria, UNHCR's relief assistance, non-food items only, has reached 860,000 displaced Syrians since the beginning of this year. In Lebanon, UNHCR has recently stepped up its capacity to register refugees. Every day, over 4,200 people approach our offices for registration. In April, over 90,000 refugees were registered in our centres. This is more than a 10-fold increase when compared with the same month.
U.S. Army General Martin Dempsey says a Russian shipment of anti-ship missiles to Syria could embolden President Bashar al-Assad's forces and prolong the conflict. Russia has sent Syria advanced ship missiles, U.S. officials said, bolstering Syrian defenses despite pleas from Washington and elsewhere to stop supplying. Assad's forces, one of the officials who spoke on condition of anonymity, said that the latest Yakon surface-to-air missiles were delivered recently.
It's at the very least an unfortunate decision that will embolden the regime and prolong the suffering. So it's ill-timed and very unfortunate. It pushes the standoff distance a little more, increases risk, but not impossible to overcome. What I really worry about is that Assad will decide that since he's got these systems, he's somehow safer.
It is dangerous, and we are working with our partners in that area as well as other countries to make sure that whatever influence we have, that doesn't continue. General Dempsey made it very clear that on the specific areas, the missiles, whatever else is involved with the Russians does not help. It makes it more dangerous.
Coming up next, the UN says eating insects could help fight obesity. Well, we'll tell you more about it after the break. Welcome back. Violence in Iraq has killed 8 people, including a police officer, his wife, and 2 children. Officials also say gunmen kidnapped 10 security force personnel in the area of Ramadi. They added gunmen broke into the home of the administrator for the Rashid area south of Baghdad, killing one of his guards. Gunmen also shot dead the imam of a mosque near the main southern port city of Basra. Near Ramadi, west of Baghdad, security forces attempted to arrest Muhammad Khamis Abu Risha, who is wanted in connection with the killing of 5 soldiers, sparking clashes with armed tribesmen in which 2 of them were killed. Demonstrators from Iraq's Sunni Arab minority accuse authorities of marginalizing and targeting their community, including through wrongful detentions and accusations of involvement in terrorism. Turkish Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan says his country has significantly reduced its oil imports from Iran, which is under the choke of Western sanctions, and further cutbacks will depend on his country's energy needs. Last year, Ankara effectively halved imports of Iranian oil after a European Union oil embargo against Iran came into full force on July the 1st, which also targeted the marine insurance sector, cutting off the usual avenues for tanker insurance. Speaking at the Brookings Institution in Washington, the day after discussing Syria with President Barack Obama, Erdogan said a no-fly zone could be discussed in Geneva at a planned international conference on Syria, backed by Washington and Moscow. Erdogan had been expected to push Obama, at least in private, for more assertive action on Syria during his visit to Washington this week. North Korea has fired 3 short-range missiles from its east coast, according to South Korea's defense ministry, but the purpose of the launches was unknown. Launches by the North of short-term missiles are not uncommon, but the ministry will not speculate whether these latest launches were part of a test or training exercise. A Japanese government source, quoted by Kyodo News Agency, noted the 3 launches, but said none of the missiles landed in Japan's territorial waters. Tension on the Korean peninsula has subsided in the past month after running high for several weeks following the imposition of tougher UN sanctions against Pyongyang following its 3rd nuclear test in February. French President François Hollande has signed a gay marriage and adoption bill into law. a day after the country's constitutional council threw out a legal challenge by the conservative opposition. Hollande, trying to turn the page on months of bitter opposition to the measures, said it was time to respect the law and the republic. The ruling cleared the way for France to become the 14th country to legalize same-sex marriage. French deputies approved the bill in Parliament last month after several days of often stormy debate. Recent polls suggest that opinion in France is fairly evenly split on both gay marriage and adoption. And now for a quick look at other news around the world. A man was arrested at the Cannes Film Festival after firing a starting pistol during a live TV broadcast on the Palm Line waterfront, sending actors Christopher Waltz and Daniel Auteuil running for cover. The incident came as police were also investigating the theft of jewelry from a hotel room at the French Riviera resort. French TV station Canal+ was interviewing Oscar-winning Waltz and French actor Auteuil live on its nightly news show from beachfront, set in front of the crowd of spectators when a man fired the starter's gun twice. In Canada, Toronto Mayor Rob Ford, a target of criticism of his often unconventional behavior, has denied media allegations that he had been caught on video smoking crack cocaine. Reporters for the Toronto Star and Gawker Media said they had watched a cell phone video that appears to show Ford smoking crack. Both news outlets said they had declined to pay the $100,000 price asked by the tipsters, people that the Star said were involved in the Toronto drug trade. Dozens of protesters gathered on New York's iconic Times Square to match and sing the hunger strike song on the day that marks the 100th day that prisoners in the Guantanamo Bay Detention Center went on a hunger strike. The strike began at the camp at the U.S. Naval Base in Cuba in February and has been joined by 100 of inmates. It has led to forced feedings to keep the weakest prisoners alive, sparking fresh outrage from rights groups over the prison, which opened under Republican President George W. Bush in 2002. The body of Jorge Rafael Videla, the former army commander who led Argentina during the bloodiest period of dirty war dictatorship, was taken to a Buenos Aires morgue hours after he died in prison at age 87. Reports say Videla was also unrepentant about kidnappings and murders ordered by the state. Videla was the first president to head the military junta that disappeared thousands of suspected leftists from 1976 to 1983. He spent his final years behind bars for human rights crimes, including the systematic theft of babies born to political prisoners in secret torture centers. The thought of eating beetles, caterpillars, and ants may give you the creeps, but the authors of a UN report say the health benefits of consuming nutritious insects could help fight obesity. More than 1,900 species of insects are eaten around the world, mainly in Africa and Asia, but people in the West generally turn their noses up at the likes of grasshoppers, termites, and other crunchy fare. The authors of the study by the Forestry Department, part of the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, say many insects contain the same amount of protein and minerals as meat, and more healthy fats. Doctors recommend eating insects in balanced diets. Eva Muller of the FAO says restaurants in Europe are starting to offer insect-based dishes, presenting them to diners as exotic delicacies. Danish restaurant Noma, for example, crowned the world's best for 3 years running in one poll, is renowned for ingredients including ants and fermented grasshoppers. This marks the end of our bulletin for today, and now for a reminder of our headlines. Independent March 14 lawmakers warn the meetings of the Electoral Subcommittee will lead to vacuum as opposing parties are sharply divided over the new electoral law. U.S. Army General Martin Dempsey says a Russian shipment of anti-ship missiles to Syria could embolden President Bashar al-Assad's forces and prolong the conflict. And finally, Turkish Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan says his country has significantly reduced its oil imports from Iran. Those were today's headlines from FutureTV, live from Beirut. I'm Linda Tamim, and I'll see you again tomorrow for more updates. Have a great evening.
هودي مسيحيين تنك
بدنا القانون، بدنا القانون، بدنا القانون.
بالاخر تنك بتكبيه.
الكويت عم تتعرض لحرب كتير كبيرة بأساسها الحرب بالشام بالضاحية الجنوبية عون وجماعته